Hi, everybody. Want to welcome you. This class is sponsored by Easy Roth Plumbing. I also want to do it in the zchus of Penina Sarah Bas Gittel-Mindel, dear friend of mine who is in surgery now as we speak, and she really needs a lot of Tehillim. So please, if you can, to keep in mind that this is in her merit, and she should have a complete refuah shlema, and we should see miracles. So the last time we were together, we were discussing the chassid who comes to the Alter Rebbe and is still complaining that he's not feeling it. He doesn't feel like he's connected with his Avodah. He just doesn't feel alive. He's not feeling like his Avodah is really working. There's something stopping him. And all throughout, we've been talking about what the Alter Rebbe says is the course for Avodas Hashem. It has to be filled with alacrity, joy, passion. It's supposed to be active. It's supposed to be moving. It's not supposed to feel like it's stagnating, slow, passive, or in any way depressed or sad. The Alter Rebbe really sees these as two diametrically opposed energies, and he really puts sadness, dejection, anything that is sluggish, he basically like shoves them all in the same category and says, this is not Avodas Hashem. So anything that makes you not happy, anything that slows you down, if it's even introspection about who you are as a person, but it leaves you feeling depressed, that's coming from the Nefesh Bahamas. It's not towards Avodas Hashem. It's not what Hashem wants. True Avodas Hashem is supposed to be with passion, joy, alacrity, movement. That's what an Ayved means. An Ayved means someone who's moving forward, not someone who stands. That would be an Aymet. An Ayved is someone who serves. He's aggressively trying to reach Eibishter. So the Alter Rebbe is speaking to this person, and he's going through a list of all the things that's stopping him maybe. Is it this? Is it because you have so many troubles in your life? Is it because you've had thoughts about how this is just going on and on and on, and you're getting wearied at the thought of always being a Beinani? And finally, the chassid says, no, it's not that, no, it's not that. And he says, really, Rebbe, I don't know what it is. And the Alter Rebbe says, you know what it is? If there is some sort of timtum halev, there's something blocking you, then it must be there's some sort of klipa that has to be broken. There's something covering over who you truly are, which means you need to do teshuvah. So we're going to be discussing now in these kind of spreading over these few chapters, the chapters 30 and 31, what does it mean that now this chassid has to do teshuvah? Teshuvah is there in order for you to return back to who you are. That's the whole concept of teshuvah. Teshuvah means to return, shuv, return. And the idea is that you, at your core, who you are, is happiness, joy, alacrity, strength, movement. That's who we are. That's what the Nefesh Elokis is. The Nefesh Bahamas is covering that over, is slowing you down, is making you sluggish. What we need to do is return back to what we were before. So the Alter Rebbe is suggesting teshuvah, and this chassid, again, we're talking about this chassid who's coming to the Alter Rebbe, and we'll talk a little bit about more about this. If this is feeling unrelatable to you, we'll talk about this a little bit more. But this specific chassid says, I don't have anything to do teshuvah for. Right? And I know that you probably know a lot of people who are like that. People who are not truthful with themselves. Of course, everyone has to do teshuvah. But this person is literally saying, I have nothing to do teshuvah for. I can't think of the sin. The Alter Rebbe says, you still have to do teshuvah, even if we don't know what the sin is that you have done, we still have to engage with teshuvah. So the chassid says, what do you mean? Like, what is this teshuvah that I'm supposed to be engaging with? And so the Alter Rebbe says, there may be a sin that you did all the way in your past, when you were a child, when you were a teenager, before you were a mature adult, that you already did teshuvah for. But now you have to return back to it in a deeper way. Because now you have refined yourself to a state where you have to be even more refined in your teshuvah. That blemish on your neshama is still there, and now that you have risen to be the person that you are, now you have to do a deeper level teshuvah for a sin that's a past sin, a sin that you've already corrected, that you've already forgiven yourself for like we discussed earlier. Like that's a concept that we have to do. We have to also forgive ourselves for the tshuva that we have done and then come right back out of it. You've done that whole process, and now you have to look at it again because you have become a new person. And again, it's this whole concept that the Alter Rebbe is really trying to drill. Okay, it's important to reiterate this idea. The Alter Rebbe is really trying to drill this idea that we're not making you a new person. You are the same person. You are the beautiful neshama that you are, and there are things that have come and blocked you, and we need to unfurl that rose. Bring out the incredible you that you are. So on the one hand, what he's saying is a little bit heavy, and it could be in ways feeling like this is a high standard, but it's also important to remember that the Alter Rebbe is coming from, it's like a line of truth. He's looking at this person, he sees their neshama. He looks into their eyes, and that's what he sees. Oh, this chassid is not feeling it? What I have to do is just like brush it away. I just have to like try to figure out why they're not experiencing what I can see. There's a beautiful story about Rav Shmuel Levitin, who I'm going to interrupt myself and just say, all the beautiful stories that I know, and this Tanya share itself, is based on the share of Rabbi Paltiel. So never think that I put this all together myself. I think it's important to quote where it's from. He is an incredible Tanya teacher, and if anyone wants to look outside of this class to discover more about Tanya, I highly recommend his classes because that's what I listen to. So he shares this beautiful story about Rav Shmuel Levitin, who, I didn't know this, actually lived in 770. He was a very special chassid. He lived in 770. The rooms, this I didn't know, the rooms that he used to live in are actually now the rooms that a chassid and kala will use when they go to a yichud room. The yichud room, it's like a library, it's like lined with svarim. That used to be his living quarters, okay? And he used to eat upstairs, the Rebbitzins used to feed him, and this is where he lived. Very, very special chassid. One time, the Frierdiker Rebbe sent him on a mission. He was supposed to bring with a very wealthy family, very like Americanized family. They didn't know much, and so he's supposed to come and bring. Imagine like this man who, I mean, according to most would say like he's probably somewhat homeless, but he wasn't. He lived in 770, and he's a very, very holy chassid. And his mission was to bring with this family. So he's sitting down, he brings with the family. The Frierdiker Rebbe told him, do not take a cent from them. They might want to offer you money. Don't take money. This is not about the money. This is not about trying to, get anything from anyone. It's only about your mission to ignite this neshama. So that's what he did. He forbranged with them. They had no idea what a forbrangun was. He shared Divrei Torah. He spoke to them. And after when he was turning to leave, the family, probably the father, was pressing him to take something. Here, let me write you a check. And Rav Shmuel Levitin said, no, I'm not here to accept money. He said, what do you mean? Why'd you come? He said, because I was here to forbrang. That's the purpose. That's why I'm here. And the man said, I don't understand. So Rav Shmuel Levitin said, I want to share with you a story. It used to be, olden days, when there were smaller villages, there would be basically a village that was small and wouldn't be able to sustain a rabbi or a sefer or any of the requirements of a Jewish community. So you would have a traveling rabbi who would basically split his time between, let's say, 8 different villages and would get paid by all these different 8 villages. And he would go and he would spend a Shabbos here and spend a Shabbos there. The sefer would spend a week here, a few days here, and he would go around. And what if you had a mezuzah that it looks fine right now, but you know that within the next 8 weeks or 9 weeks or so, the weather's going to be hard, it's going to be raining. This letter might not look perfect. So you know that the sefer's in town right now for the next 3 days. You say, just make sure to fill this in a little bit more. I want to just be preemptive and make sure that this letter is filled in more so nothing blots it out while you're gone, right? Beautiful, beautiful concept. So what he's saying is he said, I'm coming to you, I came to forbrang with you, not because chas v'shalom there's anything wrong or I need anything, I'm just here to strengthen what's already there. And when Rav Shmuel Levitin came back to report back to the Frierdiker Rebbe to share with him what this mission was like, what the shlichus was like, he shared with him that he had shared the story with him, the concept of the traveling rabbis. And the Frierdiker Rebbe says, beautiful, I love the point that you brought over to him. And I would say one little thing different. I wouldn't bring the example of a cipher filling in with ink. I would bring the example of the luchais that there was an engraving and something filled in. You know, like some dust fell inside or some mud fell inside. It's not like we are trying to add on anything to this neshama. This neshama is pure. It's goodness itself. It is passionate. It sees Eibishter. It's right there. The problem is that it has something covering over it or filling it in and not allowing the actual words to be legible because it's covered. Not that we have to black it in and make it even stronger. It's not that I have to make you stronger. It's that I need to help you clear so that you're actually there, the you that you really are. So it's important to keep that in mind. Another story that Rabbi Peltiel shared was a story about Remendel Futupas, who was also a very famous chassid. He actually has a really cool book about him. And it quotes that Remendel Futupas, who used to go on Miftzayim all the time, there's a lot of stories about him on Miftzayim. And one time he was in Eretz Yisrael at the time, and he's asking people to put on tefillin, and he stops a man on the street, an Israeli man on the street who doesn't seem to be from, and he says, I want you to put on tefillin. And the man says, I don't believe. He's like, I'm not a believer. And Rabbi Futupas' immediate response is, I don't believe that you're not a believer. I can't believe that you can't believe, because it's not possible. If you're Jewish, your natural state of being is to believe. There's nothing that is possible. It's not possible. If you're Jewish, it means you believe. There's no way that to see it otherwise, which is just a beautiful testament to how clearly Remendel Futupas saw every single yid as a neshama, as a believer, as connected to Eibishter, and maybe something stopping you. You can't actually see the reality. And we need some clearing over here. But it's not like you, yourself, who you are, needs anything. Of course you're a believer. So keeping that in mind, an important piece, to remember, is the idea that when the Alter Rebbe is talking to this chassid who seems to be on a very high level, and he tells the chassid, you have to go back and do teshuvah. Why? Because you need to break something that doesn't exist. Last time we were speaking about the Alter Rebbe's view on good versus evil. And we gave the example of light versus darkness. How darkness doesn't actually exist, it's just the absence of light. And this was a very radical shift when it came to even just the ideology of good and evil. Even in the Jewish world, people looked at evil as, yes, it exists. Giving credence to the actual klipa. And the Alter Rebbe says, why are we giving credence to klipa? It's not there. It just means that it's the absence of goodness. And if we see bad, it means it's the absence of good. It's the absence of holiness. And yes, we live in a human world. And yes, Hashem put that in place in order to hide himself. But that doesn't mean that we have to give it so much credit. We could also step into a place at the same time and hold those two opposites of Hashem is real and nothing else is real. So just to share one more story, because I think it's an important thing to bring to this example. It's like one of these joke stories. It's not really about a specific Rebbe, but imagine a man who came to his Rebbe and he says, I don't believe. And the Rebbe says, okay. And the man's like, no, Rebbe, you didn't understand me. What I said is that I don't believe. I'm lacking in emunah. And the Rebbe says, I hear you. And the man's like, Rebbe, you don't hear me. It's not okay. I don't believe. And he starts screaming. And the Rebbe says, if this is the way you don't believe, I think it's okay. Right? The idea is he's so passionate about and in so much pain over the fact that he doesn't believe, that he's having sfeikus and emunah, that he's scared. So he's coming to the Rebbe, he's complaining, you don't understand. If he's getting so riled up about it, it's okay. We understand that you're not doing so bad. He's okay. All of these stories trying to illustrate the idea that it's just the absence of something that we're seeing instead of what is truly there, which is a true mammon, a true believer, someone who really sees Hashem, sees Eibishter, and all of us have that within us. Problem here is with this chassid is he's having a problem. He's not having sfeikus and emunah, but he feels like in his avodas Hashem, he's not He's not getting what the Alter Rebbe is saying. So the Alter Rebbe says, tshuva. What is the concept of tshuva? And we spoke about this last time. It's a shattering. It's this experience of, I am going to go back and restore what should have been there. What I had was a momentary lapse of judgment where I decided to give sway to what I want instead of what Eibishter wants. I decided to forget that there is a creator in the world and I'm going to do what feels good. Right? So what I did was I gave energy to the Yetzer Hara. The Yetzer Hara himself doesn't have energy. Nefesh Bahamis doesn't have his own energy. What infuses life into the world is godliness, right? Is Nefesh Elokis. And the Nefesh Bahamis is not infusing us with life. The Yetzer Hara is just trying to take our energy and use it. So what we did was I expanded energy and put it in the wrong place. I let someone else have control over my life source. And what I have to do now with tshuva is I have to restore that. I have to give that back to Hashem. I have to give that back to myself. So that's the whole concept of shuv. It's coming back. It's giving back. It's taking back. So what happens is as soon as I engage with that concept of I want to go back to who I am, why is it like a shattering experience? Because the sin doesn't exist. It shouldn't exist. Just like evil shouldn't exist. Just like anything bad shouldn't exist, because only what exists is Hashem and Eibishter, and it's just the absence of goodness. So as soon as I have this clarity, I have shifted. I have expanded. I have grown to be back to what I was. I had shrunk because I had given away some of my energy, and now I expanded right back to where I was, back to myself. Here the Alter Rebbe is saying to this chassid, do teshuvah. The chassid says, I already did teshuvah. Been there, done that. The Alter Rebbe says, then it seems to me that you've grown in your Avaita, that you have to now do teshuvah for the things that you've done teshuvah for. Okay? So that's one level. Now the chassid says, okay, that's beautiful. That's incredible. Problem is that I actually never did a sin. So, okay, now here's where I want to bring to you this as a precursor to what we're going to be talking about. When the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya, so far the Tanya has been very relatable. Here suddenly it's feeling a little bit out of our scope. This is the first time it's feeling a little bit out of our scope. Before this, we could, I think, hear how the Alter Rebbe is saying, I'm talking to you. You're the Beinani. I understand where you're coming from. You have a Nefesh Elokis, you have a Nefesh Bahamis. I see you. I see the struggle. I see why you have anxiety. Of course you have anxiety. You have something inside of you that is constantly telling you that Hashem doesn't exist. Of course you're going to question every single part of your life. It's so scary. There's so many fears. There's so many intense moments. I understand where you're coming from. So far it's been a very gentle process. Yes, it's big. Yes, it's inspiring. It's intense. But it's felt very relatable. Here now we have to talk about the fact that the Alter Rebbe was talking to many different levels of Beinani. One time, a chassid walked into the Alter Rebbe, and he sees the Alter Rebbe poured over the Tanya. Okay, so he spent 20 years writing the Tanya. He is the author of the Tanya. He put it out, and when I say 20 years, 20 years. Like, I think he wrote the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch in 2.5 years. The Tanya he took 20 years to write, and the famous story is that he spent 3 weeks trying to decide whether the Vav, which is usually considered an extraneous letter in the Torah because it just means and, it's not such an important letter. He spent 3 weeks deciding whether or not the Vav belongs there or not. And here, a chassid walks in and he sees the Alter Rebbe pouring over the Tanya. He says, Rebbe, what are you going to learn from the Tanya? Like, he's really learning it. And this happened a few times. One time, the response he heard was, the Alter Rebbe said, there's 80 different levels of Beinani, whatever that means. And another time, a chassid walked in and found the Alter Rebbe studying the Tanya. The Alter Rebbe said, I have learned more from this book than I have learned from my Rebbe. Meaning he's discovering more that was written in the Tanya that he even had intended to write in himself. He's discovering depths within it as he is himself learning it. So what we have to keep in mind is that yes, the Tanya is relatable, and yes, we have to be able to find ourselves in the Tanya. And it's also important to note that this Tanya was written for every kind of Beinoni, all different sorts of Beinonis, and especially the Beinoni who is coming to the Alter Rebbe himself. We're talking about a chassid who really was living this level. We're not pretending when he says that I already did teshuvah for all the things that I have ever done, or he says I never did an avera. The Alter Rebbe had chassidim who were like that. So when we're talking about that kind of person, the Alter Rebbe is addressing him too. It doesn't mean that the Alter Rebbe is not addressing you just because right now it feels a little bit unrelatable. We can still make sure that it could feel relatable, and also remember that it's written for every different type of Jew. There's a story about there was a chassid who later became his own rabbi, but he was invited to become a rabbi of a distant town, and he had to travel all the way there. He was going to accept the position, but he was traveling there and considering it at the same time. On the way, so he's traveling with his people, his entourage. On the way, he stops at an inn, and he just locks himself in his room for 3 days and doesn't come out. Afterwards, he comes out and he's ready to continue on his way to this new town where he's going to become the Rav. And someone who had a little bit of gumption asks him, what just happened? You just disappeared for 3 days. What just happened? He said, I needed to think about taking on the position of being a Rav of a town. And so I took 3 days to think about every single thing I ever said, thought, did, to see if there was anything that was wrong, anything that I should be doing teshuvah for. And I found that there wasn't. And so I accepted the position. We're talking about someone who is a chassid of the Alter Rebbe, but this is an incredible caliber of person. It's almost not human. A person who, I can't even remember what I said yesterday, or what I said earlier this morning, or thought about earlier this morning, or did earlier this morning. And this is a person who went over his entire life and considered it all, the recall of everything, and then thought about it all and realized it was all good, and he could continue and do what he has to do. That's an incredible story. In ways, feels completely unrelatable. Why are we saying that? Why are we bringing this story? Because it's important to state that the Alter Rebbe wrote the Tanya for this person too. And this person's also delving into the Tanya and learning from it. And there's stuff we can learn from that story too, right? To be more intentional about how we think, do, and speak. But back to this chassid of the Alter Rebbe. So this chassid comes to the Alter Rebbe and he says, Rebbe, I don't have to do teshuvah for anything because I never have sinned. And you're saying because I'm on a higher caliber, I'm a greater person now, and I have to do teshuvah for the sins of the past? I don't have any sins of the past. So the Alter Rebbe says, okay, let's try something else. Remember, we're in this troubleshooting zone that the Alter Rebbe is trying to help this chassid of very high caliber. The Alter Rebbe says, what about all of those times where you just have neutral times? Meaning maybe there was a time that you didn't use your time as effectively as you could have. Maybe you wasted a few minutes of limud Torah. Maybe there was a moment that you ate a little too much for breakfast. Maybe there was a moment of excessive something where you put your energy where it shouldn't have been. Okay? So now we're going to an even higher level where the Alter Rebbe is saying to this chassid, maybe you didn't do anything wrong, but maybe you didn't do anything right either. Maybe there was somewhere that you could fix, that you could do teshuvah for having expended energy somewhere that it didn't have to go. Okay? And again, to make this relatable, because that's what this whole class is about, in ways that's also something pretty relatable. We could also look at all the parts of our lives. Yes, we could look at the parts of our lives that are not perfect, and maybe where we could be doing something that's against what Hashem wants, Hashem's ratzon. And at the same time, maybe we could also look at the things that we are doing right and saying, hey, how can I do this better? Is this possible that I am excessive in a certain way? Is it possible that I am not fulfilling Hashem's ratzon in exactly the way He would like? I could think about that too. I could think about how to make the rights that I do even better. So the chassid says, okay, But there wasn't ever a moment. There wasn't ever a moment that I wasted time or I expended energy and it wasn't where it was supposed to go. So now the Alter Rebbe has to go even deeper and say, okay, this is going to, again, I gave you a little warning. This is going to feel lofty, but again, it's something that is a very deep idea. So the Alter Rebbe says, is it possible that you have ever dreamed a dream that was silly? It was silly. It was ridiculous. Maybe that's something that you have to do teshuvah for. And the Alter Rebbe literally quotes a Zohar, which speaks about dreams. And it's a fascinating concept to think about what is a dream. A dream is when you are sleeping, when you are no longer in control of your body, when you're no longer, aware of your surroundings. So the Alter Rebbe is talking to this chassid and saying, was there a time when you were not in control of your body? You were not there because your neshama is not in your body any longer. And was it silly? Was it expending energy towards something that is hevel, that is nothingness? And the Zohar talks about what dreams are. And the Zohar says that when a person goes to sleep, their neshama, if they're in a pure state of mind, goes up to Shemayim. Your neshama is in Gan Eden. But if they're not worthy, it's kind of hovering. It's kind of around. Obviously, if the neshama is in Gan Eden, what's the neshama doing? It's basking in the glory of Eibishter. It's learning Torah. It's reuniting with all the other great neshamas up there. But if the neshama is not perfectly engaged in Torah and mitzvahs during the day, or has some sort of extraneous thoughts or something else, then the neshama's not exactly doing that and coming back down with chedushim and Torah. Right? Certain tzaddikim used to go to sleep and wake up with answers to queries that they had before they went to sleep in Torah. So they would feel like, I have a question in Torah, I'm not understanding this Gemara, I'm not understanding this Medrash. They would go to sleep and they'd wake up with the answer. Why did that happen? Because the neshama literally went up to Gan Eden and discussed it and came back down with the answer. It just grew their awareness, it grew their perspective. This is obviously something that is tzaddik worthy. And yet, the Alter Rebbe is asking the Beinoni, is saying, is it possible that when you went into sleep, which you are in control of, you are in control of your body, that's a time where you are there, maybe you didn't go in fully in control, and therefore you had an excessive dream. You had a silly dream, you had something that wasn't perfectly Ratzon Hashem worthy. Okay? So basically, in your subconscious, did something rise that wasn't worthy? So if those three examples aren't lofty enough, wait for the fourth. There's a famous story about Rav Zusha of Anipoli, who, it's a pretty simple statement, but it actually is very deep, where he says, ultimately, I'm not going to get whipped for not being Avram Avinu. So am I. I'm not going to be Avram Avinu, but I will definitely get whipped for not being Zusha. Right? It's a famous quote. What does he mean? Every single person has their own destiny. Every single person has their own purpose. Hashem wants you in this world for a reason. And we all have something we're supposed to expand and grow into. So why would I be judged by somebody else's actions or by somebody else's destiny? Of course, I can't try to be Avram Avinu, the father of all Jews. Obviously, that's not something that I'm worthy of, but I am worthy of my own. And if I'm not working hard to be who I can be, then there's reason for me to come back to Beis Din Shamaila and say, I'm sorry for that. Meaning I'm responsible for me. Now, why is that important to bring in? Because now the Alter Rebbe is going to go exactly against that concept. In the story of Rav Zusha, he says, I have my own destiny, I have my own purpose. All I have to do is fulfill that. That's what I'm supposed to be doing here, in this world. Now the Alter Rebbe turns to the chassid, and he says, if you have already done teshuvah for sins that you did, if you don't have to do teshuvah for sins at all because you've never done them, if you don't have to do teshuvah for excessive neutral energy that you have expended somewhere, right? And now you don't have to even do teshuvah for something that was good, but you didn't do it exactly the way you should have done it. Now, the Alter Rebbe says, I want you to look at another person and measure yourself by that other person. Not the highest person in your life, by the lowest person in your life. And here the Alter Rebbe says a fascinating thing. He says, if you think you're doing well, if you think you're doing great, beautiful. Now look at somebody else, someone who's struggling more than you. Look at their challenge. Look how far they've come. Measure the distance they have gone. Now look at yourself. Look at your challenge and measure the distance you have gone. And see, are you measuring up to yourself, to what you should be? Look how far they have gone. Have you gone those steps? Have you taken it as far as they have gone? Which is an incredible thing to do, a very scary thing to do, but an incredible thing to do. Look at somebody else, not to judge them, for the very opposite. Hey, don't worry about it. It's okay. For the very opposite. You're looking at this other person, look at their challenge, and that person can still be, imagine like the town drunk, right? Every shtetl had a town drunk. My kids found that very interesting. What does that even mean? Right? Every story just has someone. So, what was that? Anyway, so look at that man. Look at that person who seemingly is like the worst person in the community. He's not even conscious half his life, right? Look at that person. Look at how he was orphaned at 3 years old, brought up by, random people in the community. Half the time he was starving, running around. Nobody cared about him. He got into school. He got kicked out of school. He tried hard. He was shunned. Nobody liked him. He had no friends. Look at where he is right now and look how hard he has tried, and look at yourself and say, have I tried as hard as that person has tried? Because you probably have not. And go back to the drawing board and try harder. That's what the Alter Rebbe says now to this chassid. He says, I want you to work even harder to be the person that you are supposed to be. And now you're going to look at somebody else with a metric system, but not in order to judge them, and not in order to try to be like them, meaning not like them or their purpose, but using them as almost like someone to emulate, someone to say, wow, this person really invested effort. I need to go back and try even harder, come back to this with even greater strength, with even greater alacrity, and doing that with teshuvah, which will break this barrier that I'm experiencing. So, just an interesting story to put together with this concept. The Mitzler Rebbe one time was traveling and he met an old friend. They had been, childhood friends. They had gone to the same cheder, and when the Mitzler Rebbe met him, they sat down for brink. So this man was sharing with him how he is married now and how he has a family. And he works, and sometimes he gets time to learn, but he tries. And because it was a farbrengen, and because they were childhood friends, and because the Mitzler Rebbe felt like he was a mashpia, which he was, to a lot of chassidim, he turns to this old friend and he starts to give him a little musser. He says, you grew up in the Alter Rebbe's courts, you grew up, next to me, and this is what you're up to? And this chassid, who was this childhood friend, was really broken. It really hit him hard. And he kind of retorts back to the Mitzler Rebbe and he says, let's just look at what's happening here. When you were born, you were first of all probably like a neshama chadasha or something like it. Your father literally went into Gan Eden, into the treasure trove of souls, handpicked your soul, and brought you down into this safe, beautiful experience of only Torah and holiness all the time. You had a father who taught you Torah constantly. You were born into the greatness, the richness of Torah. You are surrounded with goodness and tzaddikim at all moments of your life. Who was I? I was an orphan. I was battered around. I tried to keep up with you. I did my best. What do you expect from me? I tried. I'm trying. And the Mitzler Rebbe's response was silence. Just silence. Later on in that year, or later, I don't know exactly, this chassid came back to the Alter Rebbe to visit, to have Yechidus. And the Alter Rebbe told him, "Thank you for making my barrel a chassid." That's what he said. Meaning, his son, right, the Mitzler Rebbe, finally understood this part of Tanya, where if you could compare your Avodas Hashem and you look at somebody else's Avodas Hashem and all the circumstances involved, which technically you could never really understand because you could never be in somebody else's shoes, but try. You could look at that person and say, I could probably try harder. There's no way for me to look at that person with disdain when I know that I could be coming right back to my Dalet Amos and be working just as hard as that other person is working. So these four kind of steps are what the Alter Rebbe is bringing to this chassid. And he's trying to bring him to, obviously, a higher level of awareness of godliness than he was in before, right? That's what the Alter Rebbe is he's trying to scrape it away. He's trying to uncover for this chassid what's missing. And the chassid is saying he's doing pretty well, which he is, right? Let's say he doesn't have to do teshuvah for a sin. He doesn't have to do teshuvah for a past sin. He doesn't have to do teshuvah for wasting time. He doesn't have to do teshuvah for not being intentional enough or for using excessive energy. Right now, what he might have to do teshuvah for is not trying as hard as he can to be who he should be. And he should compare himself to someone else that he might think is lesser than him, and instead discover that maybe if we looked at the statistics of how much this person has invested and how much I have invested, I could do a little bit more. And those words just themselves, or the process of thinking inside of yourself, wow, I could do better, that in and of itself is shuv. It's return. It's coming back to myself, who I am. So to make this last piece a little bit more relatable, which it sounds funny, but I find almost like the fourth one a little bit more relatable than all the other ones, because I could relate to that. I could relate to the idea of comparison. I compare myself all the time, right? Unfortunately, I do it in the other way, right? So I will compare myself to feel superior. I will compare myself so that I am the one who is doing great, right? So let's say I'm sitting in a class and I'm looking around. Is everyone getting what the teacher is saying? I'm getting it. Are they? Maybe, maybe not. She had to ask a question. I didn't, right? So there's this experience of course I compare myself to others. I'm natural, I'm human, I do this all the time. I think other people do too, but it could just be my experience. But the idea is that piece feels like, oh, I could do that. But instead of doing it in order to feel superior, I can instead do it, again, not to make myself feel inferior. That's not chas v'shalom what we're supposed to be doing. Because that would be the exact opposite. Remember, all of this is in order to get us to a space of Avodas Hashem. Avodas Hashem means joy, alacrity, passion, aliveness. Anything that's going to get us depressed or feeling shame or feeling like we're drowning is not what the Alter Rebbe is talking about. Remember, we learned about how to do teshuvah. Teshuvah is a very intentional experience. It's going in and it's coming out. It's saying, I want to go in there right now. I'm going to, let's say, choose. Everyone has their own way of being introspective. Some people walk, some people write, some people talk to another person. But whatever it is, I'm going in with intention. I'm going to do this. I'm going to, let's say, write a paper, write up one page, 750 words of reflecting on this specific thing. And then I'm going to finish that, and I'm going to feel closure, that I came to the other side of reflecting on this and feeling like, I'm sorry, Eibishter, and I'm coming back. And now I'm forgiving myself, and I'm coming back. The whole point of teshuvah, again, is supposed to be a breaking open towards something greater, not feeling lesser. So when I'm doing this comparison, which feels very relatable, I think, for myself, instead of chas v'shalom feeling superior, again, I'm not supposed to be feeling inferior, but what I am supposed to be doing is, if I'm going to be looking at somebody else's paper and what somebody else is doing, let me at least look at them and say, greatness. Look at this other person. Look at what they're handling. Look at their challenge. I would never be able to live with that challenge. Hashem didn't trust me with that challenge. Hashem never gave me that. I don't even know what that looks like and how to deal with that. Let me quickly scuttle back to my Dalit Amais and invest a little bit more effort in where I am supposed to be and my set challenge that I have ahead of me. Be it, a certain midah, a certain person, a certain child, a certain husband, whatever it is that is challenging for me. Let me come back and say, wow, I have this. It was divinely orchestrated for me to be challenged by, and for a reason. I'm supposed to come to the other side of this challenge, not look at somebody else's and feel superior. I'm supposed to, right? So this is supposed to help me by coming right back to myself. It's supposed to be kind of like an awakening of, that is their set challenge. Hashem didn't give that to me. Look at what they're doing. Look at the greatness. I want to be like that. Come back to my own and say, I'm humbler now, and now I could come back to my own Avaida, coming from a humbler, more open place. Again, it's an expansion. It's not me feeling badly about myself or getting lost in their challenge either. I know a lot of people who do that, right? So they were not built to be, a therapist, because they'll look at somebody else's challenge and just drown in feeling terrible for that person, which is beautiful and so much of his soul. But that's not the purpose here right now. It's not. This is not an Avedis Avos technique or exercise. This exercise is supposed to be about your personal Avedis Hashem. So you're looking at that other person and coming back to yourself, coming back to your lane, coming back to the set challenges that Hashem has given you and saying, I know how to deal with this now. I know how to look at this. I know how to stay the course, because this challenge is what I am supposed to overcome. So a beautiful thing, a beautiful Mamar Chazal that the Alter Rebbe quotes here is, Heves val ruach b'lifnei kol ha'adam, that you should always feel humbled before every single man, every single person, because there's something that is an opening about being humble. And that's what the Alter Rebbe is trying to bring to his chassid here. He's like, I feel like something is closed, something is stuck. We need to get you shifting. We need to get you moving. What's going to get you moving? Well, maybe when you compare yourself to somebody else and see that maybe you're not doing as well as they are with their set of challenges, right? And if you had that, who knows where you would be? Maybe there's a humbling experience that comes along with it, and that will help you open up. This is an intentional humbling. And when I experience that humbling and that opening, now I could expand. Now I can move forward in my Avodas Hashem. Now I don't feel stuck any longer. I could be an Oved who's moving, who's progressing. So we could go through all the 4 levels and try to make each and every one of them practical. I think they still are, right? I don't want you to think, okay, the Alter Rebbe was talking about a different Beinani, a higher level Beinani than I obviously am, because that would just be like saying that the Alter Rebbe, what the Alter Rebbe is saying is not necessarily relevant to you. There's something to learn from it. And you could also concentrate on what you yourself need to hear, right? So not every single part of the Tanya is meant for every person to work on in that lifetime. We only have 120 years, and there's a lot packed into this little book. So you could also choose, yes, I hear that, and this piece is what I needed to hear today. I remember one time my husband went to a Farbrengen with the Rosh, and this was after we were married, and he just went in, dropped in on a Thursday night Farbrengen, and he was back within like 45 minutes. And I remember thinking, right, me being critical, obviously, why didn't you stay? Like, you should have stayed. Like, you should have Farbrenged. And he said something so profound. He said, I heard what I needed to hear, and so I left, which was a totally different perspective for me, because I'm the type of person who, at least when it comes to Farbrengen, there's a sense of FOMO, like, obviously I can't miss out. But for him, there wasn't that sense. It was, I'm going in because I should be going in with an intention of hearing something. If I stay longer, I might lose it. I got it now, I'm going to leave. And now comes the work. Now I'm going to move forward and progress into what I'm supposed to be progressing into. But oftentimes, I know for myself, I could also get lost in like a self-help book. You read the whole book and you walk away with nothing because there's 13 chapters and they're all chock full of information, and suddenly you walk away with literally nothing, as opposed to taking like that bite-sized piece and saying, this is what I'm supposed to take, and I want to ingest it and really move forward with this piece. And sometimes it takes a day, and sometimes it takes a few years. And then you're ready for the next piece and another expansion. And that's why it helps to have people you could talk to and help you along and kind of support you in that journey. But the idea that the Alter Rebbe is saying here is that stay humble. Because being humble is the opening towards Avodas Hashem and Simcha and joy and connection. As soon as we start feeling anything other than humble, i.e. ego, that's something covering up who you really are. The pure neshama that sees Eibishter clearly. But as soon as ego comes in or something else comes in, it's a covering, it's a timtum. So let's stick with that. There's a few other stories, but there's a lot of stories. But we'll stick with this. I want to give everybody a bracha that you should experience that level of humility, and I want to include myself in this bracha, to feel like I'm walking away with something and I know where to go with that. I know the direction. I went in, I experienced the teshuva, and now I know where to go with this. And to everyone it looks different and it's a unique experience, but the Alter Rebbe says you can do it, and so you can. And also, just want to add this in, if you can, say a parak of Tehillim for Pnina Sarah Bas Gittel Menzel for a complete refuah shleima. Have a good day. Pnina Sarah Bas Menzel.